What spiritually awake people see that others cannot. Most people move through life believing they are fully aware of what surrounds them. We walk through the same streets, meet familiar faces, repeat our routines, and assume that what we experience is the full picture of reality. Yet, some individuals perceive something deeper, something subtle, that the ordinary mind often overlooks. These individuals are not superior or supernatural. They simply see with a clarity that others rarely achieve. Alan Watts often described this shift in perception as a kind of waking up, not into another world, but into the world we already live in seen, without filters, fears, or mental noise. Alan Watts devoted much of his work to exploring why most people remain half asleep in their own lives. He suggested that spiritual awakening is not about adopting new beliefs or escaping the physical world. It is about learning to see reality without distortion. The message is simple, but living it requires a transformation in how we relate to our thoughts, our senses, and our sense of individuality. The difference between conceptual thinking and direct perception. One of the first things spiritually awake people notice is that most of us do not experience life directly. We experience concepts about life. When someone looks at a tree, for example, the mind instantly labels it: tree, ordinary, beautiful, boring, or familiar. This automatic labeling happens so quickly that we don't even recognize it as a process. We confuse the label with the living thing itself. Alan Watts often emphasized that there is a vast difference between thinking about reality and encountering reality directly. Spiritually awake individuals have learned to pause this mental commentary. They do not suppress thoughts, but simply see them for what they are: descriptions, not the experience itself. They observe a sound without immediately interpreting it, or watch a sunset without rushing to name its colors. This shift may seem small, but it changes everything. Without the constant chatter of the mind, the world becomes more vivid, more immediate, and more alive. The moment stops being something the mind tries to control and becomes something the heart can finally feel. Why most people live in a mental trance and how to break free. In the view of Alan Watts, the human mind is a powerful tool, but also a tricky one. It plans, imagines, remembers, and analyzes, but when it becomes dominant, it traps us in a kind of trance. Most people are so absorbed in mental activity that they forget to live. They are physically present, but mentally absent, caught in cycles of worry, regret, expectation, and interpretation. The mind becomes like a screen placed between us and the world. Spiritually awake individuals see this trance clearly. They recognize how thoughts continuously pull attention away from what is happening right now. To break free, they learn to return to the present moment deliberately. Not by force, but by noticing. They notice the way air moves, the way their body feels, the sound of a distant voice, the colors around them. They do not cling to the past or chase the future. Instead, they allow the moment to unfold on its own. This presence dissolves the trance and reveals a deeper sense of peace, because the present moment carries no burdens, only the mind does. Understanding the illusion of the separate ego. One of the most misunderstood ideas Alan Watts explored is the sense of the separate self. He never denied individuality, responsibility, or the importance of personal identity. Instead, he pointed out how the mind constructs a rigid image of me that feels isolated from everything else. Most people believe they are separate entities navigating a world that is outside of them. This belief creates fear, anxiety, and a constant need for control. Spiritually awake individuals see through this illusion. They recognize that the self is not an isolated object, but a dynamic process connected to everything around it. Just as a wave is not separate from the ocean but a part of it, the human being is not separate from life but an expression of it. The body depends on the environment to survive, the mind depends on relationships to grow, and the heart depends on connection to feel alive. Alan Watts often explained that awakening is not about losing individuality. It is about understanding that the boundaries we draw in our minds are not the whole truth. The ego becomes more transparent, and with that transparency comes humility, empathy, and a deeper sense of belonging. The interconnectedness of all existence. When spiritually awake people look at the world, they do not see isolated objects. They see relationships. Everything affects everything else. A small action can ripple outward in ways we don't immediately recognize. The food we eat depends on the earth, the rain, the sunlight, and the efforts of countless people. The air in our lungs comes from the breath of the living world. Nothing exists entirely on its own. For Alan Watts, this interconnectedness was not just a philosophical idea, it was a lived experience. To feel connected is to see that life is not a collection of separate events, but a single unfolding dance where everything participates. Spiritually awake people feel this connection not as an abstract theory, but as a deep inner truth. It brings compassion, because when you understand you are part of something larger, hurting others feels like hurting yourself. It brings gratitude, because you recognize how much life supports you in every moment. And it brings responsibility, because your presence, actions, and choices matter. Living fully in the present moment. One thing spiritually awake people see more clearly than others is that life is happening now, only now. The past is gone and the future has not yet arrived. But most people do not truly live in the present. They revisit memories, rewrite conversations, anticipate what might happen, and get lost in thought. This constant mental travel creates tension and dissatisfaction. Alan Watts often pointed out that presence is not something we create, it is something we return to. The present moment is always available, always complete. Spiritually awake individuals are not free from problems or emotions. They simply meet those experiences fully, rather than fighting them or escaping from them. When joy comes, they feel it. When sadness comes, they acknowledge it. When uncertainty appears, they breathe with it rather than resisting. Living this way does not eliminate challenges, but it makes life more honest, more grounded, and more real. What true spiritual awakening really means. Many people imagine awakening as a dramatic event, a sudden burst of enlightenment or a mystical revelation. But Alan Watts described it differently. For him, awakening is seeing clearly. It is noticing how the mind shapes reality and learning not to be ruled by it. It is understanding that life is richer than our thoughts about it, and that peace arises not from controlling the world, but from being fully present with it. Spiritually awake people do not claim perfection. They still make mistakes, feel emotions, and face difficulties. What makes them different is how they relate to these experiences. They do not turn life into a battlefield. They approach challenges with curiosity rather than fear. They accept change as part of the natural flow. They understand that everything is temporary and this understanding makes them more patient, more compassionate, and more alive. The nature of consciousness and awareness. Alan Watts often suggested that consciousness itself is deeper than we think. Rather than being limited to the thoughts in our minds, awareness is like a space that holds everything: thoughts, emotions, sensations, and perceptions. Spiritually awake individuals sense this inner spaciousness. They realize that they are not defined by every passing thought. Instead, they are the awareness that notices those thoughts. This shift changes how they experience life. Instead of being caught in mental storms, they watch them come and go. Instead of identifying with fear or anger, they observe those emotions with clarity. This does not make them detached from life. It makes them more present within it. They respond instead of reacting, listen instead of assuming, and see instead of projecting. Spiritual awakening, in this sense, is not about escaping the world, but about being fully awake within it. It is a quiet transformation, a deep inner understanding that changes how a person sees themselves, others, and the universe. And this, as the narrator concludes, is what spiritually awake people see that others cannot: a world already complete, already interconnected, already vibrant, waiting for us to open our eyes and truly witness it.